Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Rocker, and I chose to do my Poet Laureate presentation on Natasha Tretheway and her collection of poems called Native Guard. They're the ones we're reading in class this week. Before I go over the three poems that I wanted to talk about, I wanted to give you a little bit of history on Natasha. She was born in April 26, 1966, and she is an American. She won the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry in 2007, and it was for her collection of Native Guard, which we're reading in class. Her family was comprised of her father, Eric Tretheway, and her mother, Gwendolyn Turnbow. Unfortunately, they got divorced a little bit after she was born, and then her mother remarried again. And in 1985, her mother was murdered by her second husband when Tretheway was 19 years old. Before that, her mother was a social worker. No, she was a social worker, and because of her mother's death and her mother's murder, she decided that she would let out all of her feelings through poetry. And while Native Guard focuses not just on her mother's death, but also on the Civil War, I chose to read three poems that had to do with her mother's death because I think that it's really important to understand why she started writing poetry. So, the first poem that I read was Graveyard Blues, and this just really spoke to me because it's so sad. It says, "It rained the whole time we were laying her down, rained from church to grave when we put her down. The suck of mud at our feet was a hollow sound. When the preacher called out, I held up my hand, and when he called for a witness, I raised my hand. Death stops the body's work, and the soul's a journeyman. The sun came out when I turned to walk away, glared down on me as I turned and walked away. My back to my mother, leaving her where she lay. The road going home was poked with holes, the home-going road's always full of holes. Though we slow down, time wheels still rolls. I wander now, among names of the dead, my mother's name, stone pillow for my head." Um, the last stanza, "I wander now among names of the dead, my mother's name, stone pillow for my head." Um, when I read that stanza, I just kind of thought of Tretheway walking through a graveyard, um, seeing tons of names and wondering who those people were, what their families were feeling. And then I just saw a picture of her with her head on her mother's gravestone. Um, and to write about something that's so tragic in your life and so personal, I think can touch a lot of people. The second poem that I read by her was Myth. It talks about how when she goes to sleep, her mother comes back alive and she feels closer to her. And when she wakes up, her mother's still dead the next morning. So the stanza that stuck out to me here was, "You'll be dead again tomorrow, but in dreams you live. So I try taking you back into morning. Sleepy, heavy turning, my eyes open, I find you do not follow again and again this constant forsaking." Um, and this is 6 stanzas long. Um, I just To me, this is a picture of her trying to fight through her grief. Each day she goes to sleep, she sees her mom in her dreams, and each day she wakes up, her mom is gone, and she's reminded again that someone took her mother away from her. Um, I think the last stanza here, it says, "I make between my slumber and my waking. It's as if you slipped through some rift, a hollow. I was asleep while you were dying." Um, and I can only think of that moment. She might have gotten a phone call or someone came and told her that her mother had died. Um, she was probably thinking, where was I? Why didn't I stop this? And it's almost a cry of grief inside of that moment for what she felt she could have done, or if she maybe could have stopped her mother from dying. And the last poem is right here, and it is called "What is Evidence?" And this one, this is a really dark poem, and it's really quick, so I'm going to read it. "Not the fleeting bruises she'd cover with makeup, a dark patch as if imprint of a scope she'd pressed her eye too close to, looking for a way out, nor the quiver in the voice she'd steady, leaning into a pot of bones in the stove. Not the teeth she wore in place of her own, or the official document, its seal, its smeared signature fading already, the edges wearing, not the tiny marker with its dates, her abstract as history. Only the landscape of her body, splintered clavicle, pierced temple, her thin bones settling a bit each day, the way all things do. Um, and I think in this, it's kind of her recreating how her mother was killed. And in the end, it says only the landscape of her body is left. It's her splintered clavicle, her pierced temple. Someone stuck something through her temple. Her thin bones settling a bit each day in her grave, the way all things do. And it's kind of a understanding of what has happened to the person that she loves most in the world, and being able to put it to rest of settling a bit each day. Her mother's body is now in the grave, the way all things do, the way all things end in life, the way all things move on in life. Um, so overall, I took away from this collection of poems a very personal meaning. I think that in order to write poetry, you have to be connected to the words and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And I know that when I write, that's what works best for me, is being able to draw from experience. And I think that's what will make me write poetry successfully. So I think one thing that I can take away from Natasha's writing is the fact that she chose to write about the most tragic thing in her life when she could have chosen to write about the happiest thing in her life. However, a lot of times tragedy brings about a lot of grief, but also a lot of healing and ability to move on and find new things. And I think through her mother's death, even though it was an awful thing, she was able to find the poet and the writer in herself. And now she is a poet laureate, and she's also won the Pulitzer Prize and is nationally recognized. So I think inside of that, it's not just taking away the fact that she um, found her ability to write this collection of poems, but it's also understanding that she honored someone that she loved very much through her writing. Um, and I think that's really cool, and I would like to be able to do that with my writing. So that is my presentation on Natasha Tretheway.